In the frozen mountains of Manchuria, 1943, American intelligence intercepted fragments of reports about a secret Japanese research facility, the code name, Project Oni. The mission, develop weapons that defied conventional warfare. When Allied spies finally infiltrated the compound in early 1945, they discovered something that challenged everything they understood about physics, biology, and the limits of human innovation: electromagnetic pulse weapons, advanced radar jamming, prototype jet aircraft, technologies that shouldn't have existed in 1945. This is the story of the race to capture Japanese scientific secrets before the Soviets did. A tale of espionage, desperate innovation, and the thin line between genius and madness. This story will captivate you. If you love woo alternate history and military science fiction, subscribe, hit like, and turn on notifications. Share this incredible story. Comment. What secret W2 tech fascinates you most? Washington, D.C., March 1943. The encrypted Japanese naval message arrived at Station Hypo, the U.S. Navy's cryptanalysis unit in Pearl Harbor, on March 15, 1943. It was one of thousands intercepted daily, part of the constant flow of enemy communications that American code breakers worked around the clock to decrypt. But this message was different. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort, the brilliant cryptanalyst who had helped break Japanese codes before the Battle of Midway, noticed something unusual in the transmission pattern. The message used a code designation he'd never seen before, Oni Shiro, which his Japanese linguists translated as Demon Castle. The partially decrypted message read, "Progress accelerated. Prototype field tests successful. Electromagnetic interference exceeds projections. Kiyoshi requesting additional resources. Recommend increased security measures." Rochefort immediately flagged it for his superiors. Any reference to new weapon systems was priority intelligence. But this message hinted at something beyond conventional weapons. Electromagnetic interference? What did that mean? The message was forwarded to Washington, where it landed on the desk of Major General Leslie Groves, who was overseeing America's own secret weapons project, the Manhattan Project to develop an atomic bomb. Groves read the intercept with growing concern. The Japanese were developing advanced weapons. But what kind? And how far along were they? He picked up his secure phone and made a call to William Donovan, director of the Office of Strategic Services, America's intelligence agency. "Bill, we have a problem. Japanese are working on something in Manchuria. Something advanced. I need your best people to find out what it is." Part 2. Recruiting the Team OSS Headquarters, Washington, D.C., March 20th, 1943. William Donovan assembled a small team in his secure conference room. Captain Sarah Mitchell, OSS field agent, fluent in Japanese, previously operated undercover in Tokyo before Pearl Harbor. Dr. Robert Chen, Chinese-American physicist, expert in electromagnetic theory, currently consulting on radar development. Lieutenant James Kowalski, Army intelligence officer, specialist in Japanese military organization. Sergeant Thomas Mack MacArthur, combat engineer and demolitions expert, veteran of the Philippines campaign. Donovan spread reconnaissance photos across the table. They showed a sprawling facility in the mountains of Manchuria, northern China, territory occupied by Japan since 1931. "This is what we know," Donovan began. "Japanese have a research facility here, approximately 200 miles northwest of Harbin. Codename, Project Oni. Our intercepts suggest they're developing advanced weapons. We need to know what they have, how far along they are, and whether it threatens our operations." "What kind of weapons?" Dr. Chen asked, leaning forward to study the photos. "That's what you're going to find out. The intercepts mention electromagnetic interference. Does that mean anything to you?" Chen frowned thoughtfully. "Theoretically, it could mean several things. Jamming radar, disrupting radio communications. In theory, you could even generate electromagnetic pulses that disable electronic equipment. But that's pure theory. Nobody's built anything like that." "Maybe the Japanese have," Donovan said grimly. "Your mission: infiltrate the facility, assess the threat, and if possible, acquire samples of their technology or documentation." Secondary objective, sabotage if you determine the project poses immediate threat. Sarah Mitchell spoke up. How do we get into occupied Manchuria without being detected? Chinese resistance will help. Mao's communists and Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists both hate the Japanese. They'll provide local support. But once you're near the facility, you're on your own. What's the timeline? Lieutenant Kowalski asked. You leave in 2 weeks. Training, briefing, and preparation starts tomorrow. Any questions? Mac raised his hand. Yeah. If this Oni project is so secret, how do we know the facility even exists? Could be a decoy. Good question, Donovan acknowledged. That's why you're going. If it's a decoy, you report back and we move on. If it's real, you do whatever's necessary. The team exchanged glances. They all understood what whatever's necessary meant. This wasn't a reconnaissance mission. This was a one-way trip into enemy territory with orders to steal secrets or destroy them. Welcome to Project Nightfall, Donovan said. Dismissed. Part 3. The Journey to Manchuria, April 1943. The team traveled by military transport to Kunming, China, the terminus of the Hump airlift route over the Himalayas. From there, they connected with Chinese resistance forces who would guide them north into Japanese-occupied territory. The journey took 6 weeks. They traveled at night, avoiding Japanese patrols, sleeping in caves and abandoned buildings. The Chinese guides were experts at moving through occupied territory unseen. Dr. Chen, despite being Chinese-American, had never been to China before. The experience was surreal, seeing his ancestral homeland under brutal occupation, witnessing the devastation Japan had inflicted on the Chinese people. My parents left in 1920, he told Sarah one night as they huddled around a small fire in a cave. They told me stories about the old China, but this, he gestured at the destroyed village visible in the valley below. This is horror. Sarah nodded. She'd seen occupied France, occupied Poland. War stripped away civilization, revealed what humans were capable of when ideology trumped humanity. We stopped them, she said simply. Whatever they're building, we stop it. By mid-May, they were within 10 miles of the target facility. Chinese scouts reported the area was heavily patrolled. Japanese security had increased significantly in recent months, suggesting whatever was happening inside was important. The team established a hidden base camp in the mountains overlooking the facility. Using binoculars and telescopes, they began surveillance. Part 4. The Facility Project. Oni's facility was larger and more sophisticated than the reconnaissance photos had suggested. It consisted of Main Research Building, a 3-story concrete structure built into the mountainside, heavily reinforced. Power Station, large coal-fired power plant, unusual for a remote location, suggesting high energy requirements. Testing Grounds, a large open area with strange metal towers and equipment. Barracks, housing for approximately 500 personnel, scientists, technicians, and security forces. Perimeter defenses, watchtowers, machine gun nests, minefields, and constant patrols. This is big, Lieutenant Kowalski observed through binoculars. This isn't some small research lab. This is a major installation. Dr. Chen was focused on the testing grounds. Those towers, they look like they're for electrical experiments. High voltage testing maybe, but the scale, he shook his head in disbelief. Can you tell what they're working on? Sarah asked. Not from here. We need to get inside. Mac studied the defenses. Getting in will be hard. Getting out will be harder. Maybe impossible. That's why they pay us the big bucks, Sarah said dryly. Let's develop a plan. Over the next 3 days, they observed patrol patterns, guard rotations, delivery schedules. They identified vulnerabilities. Supply trucks arrived twice weekly. Guard changes happened at 0600 and 1800 hours. The facility's western perimeter was less heavily defended due to the steep mountainside. Scientists occasionally left the facility to conduct field tests. The plan came together. They would infiltrate during a supply delivery, split up inside to gather intelligence, then rendezvous and extract via the western perimeter before dawn. It was risky, probably suicidal, but it was the only option. We go tomorrow night, Sarah decided. May 20th. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out what the Japanese are hiding. Chapter 2, Inside Project Oni. Part 5. The Infiltration. May 20th, 1943, 2200 hours. The supply truck rumbled through the facility's main gate, its canvas-covered cargo area hiding 4 American infiltrators among crates of equipment and supplies. The guards had inspected the truck at the gate, but hadn't thoroughly searched the cargo. Routine had made them complacent. The truck drove into the compound, past the barracks, toward the main research building's loading dock. When the truck stopped, the team waited until the driver and guards moved away. Then they slipped out, moving silently into the shadows. Sarah and Lieutenant Kowalski headed toward the administrative building where documents and plans would be stored. Dr. Chen and Mac headed toward the research laboratories to assess the technology. The facility was illuminated by harsh electric lights, casting stark shadows. Japanese guards patrolled in pairs. Scientists in white coats occasionally moved between buildings, clutching folders and looking exhausted. Dr. Chen and Mac reached the laboratory building's side entrance. Mac picked the lock, a skill acquired through OSS training and natural talent. They slipped inside. The interior was startling. Instead of primitive facilities, they found a sophisticated research complex with equipment that seemed decades ahead of its time. Oscilloscopes displaying complex waveforms, racks of vacuum tubes and electronics, high-voltage generators, and things Chen couldn't immediately identify. This is more advanced than anything we have," Chen whispered, photographing everything with his miniature camera. "The Japanese are further along than we thought." They moved deeper into the facility, following signs in Japanese that Chen translated: high-voltage laboratory, electromagnetic testing, resonance chamber. That last one intrigued Chen. Resonance chamber? What are they resonating? They found out when they reached the main laboratory. Part 6. The Discovery. The resonance chamber was a massive room, 50 feet on each side, lined with copper coils and strange crystalline structures. In the center stood a device unlike anything Chen had seen. A cylindrical chamber surrounded by electromagnetic coils, connected to massive capacitor banks and power supplies. Japanese scientists were running a test. One of them, an elderly man with white hair and intense eyes, appeared to be in charge. Chen and Mac hid behind equipment racks, watching and photographing. The white-haired scientist, his name tag read Dr. Takeshi Kiyoshi, called out orders in Japanese. Technicians adjusted controls. The hum of power filled the room. "Initiating resonance field," Kiyoshi announced in Japanese. "Power to 30%. The device activated. The air itself seemed to shimmer. A blue-white glow appeared around the central chamber. Electronic equipment throughout the room began displaying strange readings. Electromagnetic field strength, 50,000 Gauss. A technician reported. Frequency locked at 50 megahertz. Resonance stable. "Increase to 50%, Kiyoshi ordered. The hum intensified. The glow brightened. And then Chen saw something impossible. A radio on a nearby bench sparked, smoked, and died. So did another, and another. Every electronic device within a certain radius of the central chamber suddenly failed. "Electromagnetic pulse effect confirmed," a technician said excitedly. "Range approximately 20 meters at 50% power." Chen's eyes widened. They'd done it. The Japanese had built an electromagnetic pulse weapon, a device that could disable electronics within its range. At full power, it could potentially knock out radar systems, radio communications, maybe even aircraft electrical systems. This was exactly the kind of advanced weapon the Allies feared Japan was developing. But the demonstration wasn't finished. "Preparing for directed beam test," Kiyoshi announced. "Target: the drone aircraft on the test range." Through a window, Chen could see the testing grounds. A small unmanned aircraft sat on a launch rail. "Fire the pulse," Kiyoshi ordered. The device's orientation shifted. The electromagnetic coils redirected their energy in a focused beam. A barely visible distortion in the air shot toward the drone aircraft. The drone's engine coughed and died. Its control surfaces froze. It was completely disabled without a single bullet or bomb. "Success!" Kiyoshi smiled. "Gentlemen, Project Oni works." We can disable enemy aircraft, ships, even tanks from a distance. This weapon will change warfare forever. Chen had seen enough. This technology was far more dangerous than they'd imagined. They needed to get this intelligence to Washington immediately. He tapped Mac's shoulder. Time to go. They were backing away when Mac's boot knocked over a metal tool. The clang echoed through the laboratory. Every Japanese scientist and guard turned toward them. Baxter Part 7, Escape and Pursuit. Spies! Someone shouted in Japanese. Intruders in the laboratory! Guards rushed toward them, rifles raised. Chen and Mac ran, sprinting back through the corridors they'd entered through. Alarms blared. The entire facility went into lockdown. Doors began sealing automatically. This way! Mac shouted, leading them down a side corridor. He pulled out a thermite grenade, designed for destroying equipment. We can't let them keep this technology! Wait! Chen grabbed his arm. If we destroy the lab now, we're dead. We need to get out first, then come back with a bomber strike. They burst through a side door into the open compound. Searchlights swept the area. Guards were mobilizing everywhere. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off concrete near their feet. They dove behind a truck, returning fire with their suppressed pistols. Where's Sarah? Chen gasped. As if in answer, an explosion rocked the administrative building. Flames erupted from a second-floor window. Sarah and Lieutenant Kowalski appeared, running toward them. Got the documents? Sarah shouted, a satchel slung over her shoulder. But they know we're here. We all saw the same thing? Mac asked. The pulse weapon? Kowalski nodded. Yeah, we saw the test from the office windows. This is bad. More gunfire. A guard fell from a watchtower. Sarah had shot him, but there were dozens more guards converging on their position. Western perimeter, Sarah ordered. Move! They ran through the compound using trucks and buildings for cover. Guards pursued, firing constantly. Mac threw thermite grenades to slow the pursuit, setting buildings ablaze. They reached the western fence. Mac placed explosive charges on the wire. Fire in the hole! The explosion tore through the fence. They scrambled through the gap, climbing the steep mountainside beyond. Behind them, the facility was in chaos. Fires burned. Guards were organizing pursuit teams. Dr. Kiyoshi stood outside the laboratory, watching the Americans escape, his face twisted with fury. The team climbed desperately, using darkness and terrain for cover. Bullets whined past them. One caught Mac in the shoulder, spinning him around. Chen grabbed him, kept him moving. They reached the rendezvous point where their Chinese guides waited with horses. Go! Sarah urged. Ride hard! They'll be following. They rode through the night, knowing Japanese forces would be pursuing. But they'd succeeded. They'd infiltrated Project Oni. They'd documented the electromagnetic pulse weapon. And they'd survived. Now they just had to get the intelligence back to Washington before the Japanese captured or killed them. Chapter 3. The Race Against Time. Part 8. The Pursuit. The Japanese pursuit was relentless. Colonel Yamamoto, chief of security for Project Oni, had mobilized every available soldier. He understood the stakes. If the Americans revealed what they'd seen, Project Oni would become a priority target for Allied bombing. Over the next 2 weeks, the OSS team fought a running battle across Manchuria. The Japanese were always just hours behind them. Chinese resistance fighters helped, slowing Japanese forces with ambushes and false trails. But the pressure was constant. Mac's shoulder wound became infected. He developed a fever, slowing the team down. Dr. Chen treated him with sulfa drugs, but they needed proper medical facilities. Leave me, Mac said during one rest stop. I'm slowing you down. Get that intelligence home. We don't leave people behind, Sarah said firmly. You're coming with us. They pushed on, finally reaching the American lines in southern China on June 10, 1943, 3 weeks after infiltrating Project Oni. Sarah immediately requested secure communication with Washington. When the connection was established, she spoke directly to General Donovan. Sir, Project Oni is real. The Japanese have developed an electromagnetic pulse weapon. It can disable electronic equipment at range. They tested it successfully. We have photographs, documents, and eyewitness testimony. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, how long until they can deploy it operationally? Sarah looked at Dr. Chen, who had been analyzing their intelligence during the journey. "Based on what we saw," Chen answered, "they're 6 months from field deployment, maybe less. If they get this weapon into combat, it could neutralize our radar systems, disable our aircraft electronics, disrupt communications. Sir, this could change the entire Pacific War." "Understood," Donovan replied. "Stay where you are. We're sending a plane to extract you immediately. And Agent Mitchell, good work." Dissected Part 9. Washington's Response. The team arrived in Washington on June 20th, 1943. They were immediately debriefed by military intelligence, shown their photographs and documents to weapons scientists, and had their eyewitness accounts recorded in detail. The response was intense. President Roosevelt was personally briefed. Military planners began developing options. Dr. Chen found himself working with American scientists, trying to understand the electromagnetic pulse technology. "It's theoretically sound," he explained to a room full of generals and scientists. "An intense electromagnetic field can induce currents in electronic equipment, frying circuits. The Japanese have apparently solved the engineering challenges we're still working on." "Can we build one?" General Groves asked. "Eventually, yes. But they have a head start. They'll deploy first. Then we need to destroy their facility," someone suggested. "Already working on it," an Air Force general replied. "We're planning a strategic bombing raid. The problem is range. Manchuria is at the extreme limit of our bomber capabilities." Plans came together quickly. B-29 Super Fortress bombers, America's newest and most advanced, would launch from bases in China, hit Project Oni's facility, and return. It would be one of the longest-range bombing missions of the war. But there was a complication. "Our intelligence indicates the Japanese are moving the project," an analyst reported. "After the security breach, they're relocating to a more secure facility. We have a 2-week window before the equipment is moved and we lose the target location. The raid would have to happen fast." Part 10. The Bombing Raid. July 5, 1943. 8 B-29 Superfortress bombers took off from Chengdu, China, their bomb bays loaded with high-explosive and incendiary bombs. Their target, the Project Oni facility in Manchuria. The mission was dangerous. They'd be flying at maximum range over hostile territory against a target that had been reinforced since the OSS team's infiltration, but it had to be done. Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Chen, Lieutenant Kowalski, and Mac, recovered from his wound, sat in a command post listening to radio traffic from the raid. They'd asked to participate, but were denied. They'd already done enough. The B-29s reached the target at dawn. Japanese fighters rose to intercept, Kai-43 Oscars and Kai-61 Tonys. A desperate air battle erupted as American gunners fought to protect the bombers. One B-29 was hit, engines burning, but stayed in formation. Another took damage but kept flying. The Americans pressed on. "Bombs away!" the lead bombardier reported. 40 tons of high explosives fell on Project Oni. The facility disappeared in a series of massive explosions. Secondary explosions suggested fuel and ammunition storage had been hit. Fires raged across the compound. "Target destroyed," the raid commander reported. "All aircraft withdrawing." But the cost had been high. 2 B-29s were shot down by fighters. Another crashed on the return flight, fuel exhausted. Of the 8 bombers that began the mission, only 5 returned. 55 airmen had participated. 27 didn't come home. Part 11. The Aftermath. Reconnaissance photos confirmed Project Oni's facility had been completely destroyed. The main research building was rubble. The power station was demolished. The testing grounds were cratered. But intelligence reports in subsequent months suggested the Japanese had salvaged some equipment and documentation. The project wasn't dead, just set back. "We bought time," Dr. Chen told the team during a reunion in Washington. "Maybe a year, maybe more, but they'll rebuild. The knowledge exists. You can't bomb away knowledge." "So what do we do?" Mac asked. "We develop our own," Sarah replied. "If the Japanese have electromagnetic pulse weapons, we need countermeasures. And eventually, we need the same capability." She was right. The arms race had escalated to a new level. Project Nightfall's team received commendations for their work. Sarah Mitchell received the Distinguished Service Cross. Dr. Chen was appointed to lead American electromagnetic weapons research. Lieutenant Kowalski and Mack received Silver Stars. But the mission's true impact was strategic. Project Oni had been stopped before it could change the war. The Japanese electromagnetic pulse weapon never saw combat deployment. In alternate history, without that intervention, Japanese EMP weapons might have neutralized American radar and communications in late 1943, prolonging the Pacific War by months or years. But because 4 Americans infiltrated a secret facility and brought back intelligence, because B-29 crews flew an impossible mission, and because 55 airmen risked everything, Project Oni was destroyed. The Pacific War would be won with conventional weapons. The electromagnetic pulse would remain theoretical until the nuclear age, when high-altitude nuclear explosions would produce EMP as a side effect. But in Manchuria, in 1943, for a brief moment, the future of warfare had appeared in a Japanese laboratory, and America had stopped it. Chapter 4. The Final Revelation. Part 12, September 1945. The war was over. Japan had surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. American occupation forces were moving through Japan and formerly occupied territories, documenting Japanese military capabilities and war crimes. Sarah Mitchell, now a major, was assigned to the Occupation Authority investigating Japanese weapons programs. On September 20th, 1945, she visited the ruins of Project Oni's original facility. 2 years had passed since the bombing raid. The site was overgrown with weeds, the buildings collapsed shells. But the Japanese had left something behind, a cache of documents hidden in a bunker that had survived the bombing. Sarah and a team of translators spent days reviewing the documents. What they found was fascinating and terrifying. Project Oni had been more ambitious than anyone realized. The electromagnetic pulse weapon was just one component. The Japanese had been researching directed energy weapons, advanced radar jamming, experimental jet aircraft, rocket-assisted munitions, early computer-guided weapons. Some of these projects had been further along than others. Some were pure research, but the ambition was staggering. One document particularly caught Sarah's attention. It was Dr. Kiyoshi's personal journal, recovered from the ruins. She had it translated. March 1943. We are so close. The resonance field generator works beyond expectations, but I fear we lack time. The Americans grow stronger each month. Can science alone win a war Japan has already lost strategically? I work not from belief in victory, but from obligation to knowledge. If Japan falls, at least our research will advance human understanding. Sarah found it fascinating. Dr. Kiyoshi wasn't a fanatic. He was a scientist who kept working because it was what he did, even when he knew the war was lost. Did we ever find Dr. Kiyoshi? Sarah asked her assistant. Yes, ma'am. He's in Tokyo, cooperating with American researchers. The deal was immunity in exchange for full disclosure of his research. Sarah nodded. It was the same deal made with German scientists. Operation Paperclip in Europe. Japanese scientists who had conducted ethically questionable research were being recruited by American intelligence because their knowledge was too valuable to waste. It left a bitter taste. But that was the reality of post-war realpolitik. Part 13. The Interview. Sarah arranged to interview Dr. Kiyoshi in Tokyo. He was staying in a small apartment under American supervision, working as a consultant on electromagnetic research. When she entered his apartment, the elderly scientist recognized her immediately. You, he said in English, you were one of the infiltrators. The woman. I remember seeing you escape. Yes, Sarah confirmed. I'm Major Mitchell, U.S. Army Intelligence. I have questions about Project Oni. Kiyoshi gestured to chairs. Ask. I have agreed to answer. Though I suspect I know your questions already. Did the electromagnetic pulse weapon actually work? Oh, yes. Within certain parameters. We could disable electronics at 50-meter range, with improvements perhaps 200 meters. But beyond that, the power requirements became prohibitive. It was an elegant scientific achievement, practically less impressive. Why pursue it if Japan was losing the war? Kiyoshi smiled sadly. Why does any scientist pursue knowledge? Because it's there, because it's possible, because we can. I knew by 1943 that Japan couldn't win, but research continued because we were scientists. We believed knowledge transcended politics. Did it? Sarah asked pointedly. No, Kiyoshi admitted quietly. Knowledge serves power. Always. My research would have killed American pilots if deployed. I told myself I was advancing science, but I was building weapons for empire. There's no escaping that. Sarah studied him. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but remorse didn't undo the work he'd done. What happens now? Kiyoshi asked. You continue working with American researchers. Your knowledge helps us. That's the deal. And you? Kiyoshi asked. How do you feel about that deal? Sarah considered the question. Conflicted. You built weapons that could have killed my countrymen, but you're also a brilliant scientist whose knowledge can benefit the world. War makes strange compromises necessary. Indeed, Kiyoshi agreed. War reduces everything to pragmatism. Morality becomes flexible. They talked for another hour. Kiyoshi explained the theoretical basis of his research, the engineering challenges, the limitations. Sarah recorded everything. As she was leaving, Kiyoshi said, Major Mitchell, one more thing. Your raid on my facility. It killed 17 of my researchers. Good people. Scientists who loved knowledge. I thought you should know their names. He handed her a list. Sarah looked at it. 17 Japanese names, ages, brief biographies. I'll file this with the official records, Sarah said quietly. They should be remembered too. Kiyoshi nodded. War creates only victims. Some wear uniforms, some wear laboratory coats, all pay prices they didn't set. Epilogue. The truth revealed. Author's note. This was science fiction. Everything you just read was alternate history science fiction. While based on the real historical context of W. West and real scientific principles, Project Oni, the electromagnetic pulse weapon, Dr. Kiyoshi, the OSS infiltration team, and the specific events described are entirely fictional. What was real? 1. Japan did conduct secret weapons research in Manchuria and elsewhere, including chemical, biological, and conventional weapons programs. 2. Electromagnetic pulse, EMP theory existed in the 1940s, though practical EMP weapons weren't developed until the nuclear age. 3. The OSS did conduct intelligence operations in China and Japanese-occupied territories. 4. Strategic bombing raids acted on Japanese facilities in Manchuria did occur, though not targeting a fictional Project Oni. 5. Post-war recruitment of Axis scientists happened through programs like Operation Paperclip, German scientists, and similar efforts with Japanese researchers. What was fictional? 1. Project Oni, completely invented for this story. 2. The electromagnetic pulse weapon described. Fictional 1940s technology. 3. All named characters. Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Kiyoshi, etc. Entirely fictional. 4. The specific infiltration mission. Fictional espionage operation. 5. The bombing raid on Project Oni. Fictional military operation. Why create this fiction? This story explores real white themes, technological warfare, espionage, moral complexities of weapons research through a science fiction lens. It honors the real courage of Wadi intelligence operatives and combat crews while creating a thriller that doesn't exploit actual human suffering. The real history. For factual information about Wadi weapons research real programs like the Manhattan Project, Atomic Bomb, study actual espionage operations by OSS and SOE, learn about strategic bombing campaigns in the Pacific, examine post-war Operation Paperclip and Japanese scientist recruitment. Educational. Purpose. This story was created to entertain through alternate history science fiction, explore ethical questions about weapons research, honor Babu cause. Veterans without exploiting real atrocities show how technological warfare evolved. Respect to real veterans. The courage displayed by OSS agents, bomber crews, and resistance fighters in Wadi Twent was real. This fictional story was inspired by their genuine heroism, though the specific mission and characters are invented. Real Wadi history is extraordinary. Real stories of courage need no embellishment. This was creative fiction exploring what-if scenarios in the WO2 context. This was complete fiction, alternate history, science fiction entertainment, not historical fact. Thank you for reading this work of fiction. Understood this was fiction? If you enjoyed this WO2 sci-fi thriller, subscribe for more creative alternate history, hit like, and share. Comment. What what-if scenario interests you? Turn on notifications for more stories. Final disclaimer. This story was entirely fictional, an alternate history science fiction exploration set in WO2. All characters, organizations, except real historical entities like OSS, specific events and technologies described were invented for entertainment. No disrespect intended. This story was not created to minimize or trivialize real WO2 events, suffering, or atrocities. It was created as respectful fiction that explores technological warfare themes without exploiting real human tragedy. Educational value. While fictional, the story touches on real themes: espionage operations, technological arms races, ethical questions about weapons research, and post-war moral compromises. Learn real history. Please research actual WO2 history to understand what really happened. Real events are more compelling than any fiction. Thank you for reading responsibly.